Welcome everybody to another talk. Today I'm going to be speaking with Vernon Mahabal, a very well-known palmist and chirologist, and I mean lots of different. What's your favorite term that you like to introduce?
I'm a palmist.
A palmist. Okay,
I'm a palmist.
I mean, everybody has a different, they like to announce it in a different way. Some it's sort of hand analysis, or like you say, palmistry or chirologist. To cut a long story short, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, was talking about having his palm read, and we were just sort of talking about the merits of different systems. And then I said, just out of interest, who did your palm? And he said, Vernon. And I said, right. So I, after a little bit of internet searching, I tracked you down, got a hold of you. We spoke briefly, and I thought you'd have you have got an interesting tale to tell. So yeah, I thought we'd get him on and hear, because I've been doing a lot about palmistry lately. I've been doing a lot of talking to palm experts. And I felt it had been a bit too heavily weighted towards the Western side. It's the Vedic or the Indian palmistry that really interests me anyway. So you're the perfect person to have on to sort of correct that balance. So anyway, so I'll leave it to you, Vernon. So do you want to give people a little bit of background? How did you get into this fascinating topic? A little bit about your history. That'd be really interesting.
Well, oddly enough, when I was in high school in Maryland, I saw a book. I was 17 years old. A book on palmistry in my school library.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of opened it. I was actually quite intrigued by it. And I started looking at my friends' hands, and they all said, will you just stick to baseball? What is this? What are you doing here? So I was always intrigued by it. And then, of course, I would always pass by the crystal ball reader and see people on the street reading hands and doing tarot readings. And I was, a little bit intrigued by the whole idea. It was mystical to me. It was very fascinating. When I was 20 years old, I joined an ashram in New York. It was the Hare Krishna movement. I'm sure you're familiar with them. And so they're as Vedic as you can get. So I learned, and I was schooled in the texts of the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, and all the various Puranas. And I adopted spiritually the Vedic path. I'm half Italian, so I came from a Roman Catholic background. I found a lot of actually similarities in the two religious systems, if you will. But I was very much attracted to the Vedic view. And then after about three years living in the temple, I met someone named Patrick, and he read hands on the street on St. Mark's Street in Manhattan. And I used to always hang out with my friends in the Lower East Side. And one day I got enough courage to say, what are you doing? And lo and behold, I became his student for like 5 or 6 years. And I used to sit at his table and just watch him read hands. And then he would point things out to me as he was reading hands and even after the reading. And I remember the first day that I sat next to him and watched him give readings, there was a guy who said to Patrick, he said, you have given me more information than any career consultant, any psychologist, et cetera, in these 15, 20 minutes that I've ever heard. And I was just blown away. I said to myself, I've got to learn this art. It's really interesting. So as I said, I became a student for 5 or 6 years, and he was French, and he knew the Western system really, really well. And then I went to India maybe like 15, 16 times to pursue also my Vedic spirituality, and at the same time learn from other Vedic palmists. So
the guy, I'm just going to ask that the guy who was just doing it on the street, what was the setup there? He was just so it was just people. Did people book to see him, or you just literally
No, he just had a table. It was as simple as possible. He had a table and he would just read hands. But I remember even before that, maybe I was like 18 or 19. One of my friends we were walking around Manhattan, and it was 42nd Street actually. And he said, "Oh, you should get a reading from this woman." And this woman was just sitting in a lawn chair on 42nd Street. And she looked at my hand and she said, "One day you're going to be doing what I'm doing."
Wow.
And she told me two things: don't get married too early, which I didn't, and then she said, "One day you'll be doing what I'm doing." So I was like 18 or 19, and I thought to myself, really, one day I'm going to sit on the street in a lawn chair on 42nd Street and read hands?
Wow. I mean, that's really sort of frontline work, isn't it? Because you're opening yourself up to virtually anything.
Exactly, exactly. And I learned how to, read a hand in like 15 minutes or less. I used to sit on the subways in New York and just look at people's hands, and I would have a line, and people would say to me, I've got to get off in 3 stops, so can you hurry up? Tell me something.
Wow, amazing.
So I learned to read hands pretty quickly, and by the time I left the temple, which was about maybe 1986, 87, that began my career. I just actually opened my door to give readings, and I've never stopped. It became my career.
So you went to India, and then what was the sort of story there? How did you manage to? I mean, did you find it was completely different to what you were doing before? Did you have to rethink everything, or had what you got up to that period act as a sort of good grounding?
That's a great question. My Western, if you will, background of palmistry really helped me to understand the Vedic aspects, because there are similarities, but it's a whole different psychology of looking at hands or reading charts. Interestingly enough, Andrew, the palmists I met in India were, I wasn't that impressed.
Okay.
Maybe a couple. I'm not criticizing anyone here, but I was more impressed by the astrologers. I used to hang out with K.N. Rao. He's a Vedic astrologer. I don't know if he's still around, but I learned a lot from the Vedic astrologers in India. And I also learned that to them, which is very different in the West, to an astrologer in the East, hand reading is a brother or sister to astrology. In fact, very few people in India, or let's say even Japan or Malaysia or Singapore, know what time they were born. Sometimes they don't even know what day they were born. So many times they'll be familiar with the hand and look at the hand shape and the different signs and lines, and at least figure out what is the ruling planet, or try to understand what is the approximate birth time, you see. So looking at hands and reading charts is both concomitant to each other, and you don't see that in the West. Most astrologers in the Western world don't understand that palmistry and astrology are a brother or sister to each other. So living in the temple for 5 or 6 years, I was familiar with Sanskrit. I learned a lot of Sanskrit living in the temple, because we would analyze the Srimad Bhagavatam, we would analyze the Bhagavad Gita, we would analyze all the different Puranas, and so I would open up these old books on palmistry, and they were all in Sanskrit. Some were in Hindi, some were in Bengali, but most were in Sanskrit. And I would, in a sense, unlock it, if you will. The interesting thing is that the oldest palmistry treatise in the world was written in 3100 BC, and that's about 5,000 years ago. And it's called the Hasta Samudrika Shastra in Sanskrit. Hasta means hand. Samudrika means the divine study of the planetary aspects related to the hand. And Shastra means scripture. Interestingly enough. So the interesting thing, Andrew, is that Vedic spirituality and palmistry and astrology and all these psychic arts are part and parcel, you see. In fact, the person who wrote this treatise, the Hasta Samudrika Shastra, his name was Garga Rishi, and he was the palmist to the person who spoke the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna. He was Krishna's palmist. And what I found in the Eastern world is that centuries ago, parents would have an astrologer or a palmist give a reading to their son or daughter when they were like an infant, and they would even give the name to that little girl or little boy based on the planetary influences and frequencies. So the name of the little boy or girl was given by the astrologer or by the palmist, about thousands of years ago. And that's lost. And the name, our name, it has everything to do with frequencies and vibrations and energies. Now I sound like a new age, but it's true.
I think certainly a lot of the Jyotish software now, the more expensive versions of it, they'll have a section in there which will allow you to name based on one of the nakshatras or something. It'll give you but where that information is coming from, I can't say, but it's built into the software. So they'll recommend a particular sound associated with a particular star that was rising on the horizon. So that's, in other words, bring the benefits of that star into
exactly.
So maybe the same kind of idea, I would imagine.
And you're right. I 100% agree with you. And I want to say that the very big difference that I've seen between Western astrology and Vedic astrology is this. Western astrology tends to be sun-oriented, tropical astrology. And so it talks a lot about career stuff, how we're viewed by other people, what our material destiny, if you will, is, that type of thing. It's the outer self. Whereas Vedic astrology is more moon-based. And so it deals with the heart, the emotions, the soul. And so Vedic astrology gets much more into who we are as human beings, what our passions are, who we are as human beings, how we relate with each other, more than just career stuff. But the attack, if you will, of looking at a Vedic chart or a palm and the Western system, it's quite different. The whole psychology is different. Some people are just very much drawn to Vedic astrology, and some people are drawn to Western palmistry astrology, and it's a very different way of looking at the stars, you see.
Yeah, I've not had really any experience. I mean, Western, I obviously knew my sun sign from being a kid. You kind of read it in the newspapers and stuff, but it was only after I got into the kind of Vedic material I was interested in the Ayurvedic approach, and Jyotish naturally tacks onto that because it's mentioned so much in those texts. But because of that, I thought it seemed more obvious to me to learn the Indian system. So I've grown up actually knowing very little about the West. I listen to Western astrology and it doesn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, I get we're all using the same thing. It's just the approach is very much different. So yeah, definitely what you're saying there, 100%. It's a very different approach, even between using tropical and sidereal.
Well, and the interesting thing, Andrew, is that Western astrology, let's say, began around the time of Mesopotamia, and it grew into Greek astrology and Roman astrology and that type of thing. They kind of molded it from there. At the same time, if you look at the Mayan system, or what the ancient Olmecs used to use, or the Aztecs used to use, to me, it's closer to Vedic astrology than even the Western system. And that makes all the sense in the world, because there's great differences of area between them. But Vedic astrology has its roots for thousands and thousands of years. People always ask me, how long have people been reading hands? How long have people been looking at astrological charts? Well, in the Vedic view, people have been on this planet for millions and millions of years. And so astrology and palmistry have always been used. It's only in the last, let's say, 300 years that, and especially in America, that it doesn't have the credibility or the distinctiveness that it used to have. But it is coming back. I absolutely see that what I'm doing is becoming mainstream. I remember, Andrew, in the 1980s or even the early 90s, I would say to people, if they asked me what was my career, I would say, I'm a palmist. And they would go, what's that? And I said, well, I look at your life purpose. I look at your talents and abilities. And they would go, you make a living from that? And after the year of 2000, and especially after 2012, Andrew, it's become, like I say, mainstream. People now say, oh, you're a palmist? I want my hand read. I want to get a reading from you. And so what astrologers and palmists and numerologists and psychics are doing now, like I say, we're in the mainstream. You can say now to people that, hey, I'm going to go to my astrologer, just as easy as you can say, oh, I'm going to my chiropractor, and nobody will bat an eyelash anymore. Before, like 2000, people would say, you're going to an astrologer? Now people understand that palmistry and astrology can give them so much more information and knowledge about themselves than, as I said before, any career consultant, any psychologist. It takes sometimes a psychologist 100 sessions to pull out what we can do in 10 minutes.
When you were there and you were studying in India, when you were looking around and obviously you'd already had your background in the Western system, you've gone to India, now you're being exposed to this other way of looking. What were you picking up over there that you thought, actually, I could work with this? I mean, what was the approach you were seeing over there? Were they looking more at constitution and shape of hand, or were they working more with the lines, or were they looking more at symbols on the hand? What did you experience over there and you found to be of most use?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you had Richard Unger on the other day, and I love Richard. He's a genius. We both, he was farther along than I was, but we were both looking at fingerprint systems. I was in New York and he was in California, and we met and compared systems. And I used to sit in on he was welcoming enough to me and wonderful enough to me. He would let me sit on his sessions with his students. And so we have a very, very similar fingerprint system. And we agree to disagree on a few points, but
I think
90% of what we look at is exactly the same. So I was looking at fingerprints because that is my big focus. Fingerprints to me contain one's past lives. They contain challenges from the past lives, and especially what we're here to do on this planet in this lifetime. They contain all of our talents and abilities. Fingerprints has always been, as I said, my focus. And so I was looking at the Vedic system to understand what they said about fingerprints, because I understood, the Western idea coming from me and Richard. But I wanted to see what the Vedic view was. Now, interestingly enough, we are spiritual soul. In the Vedic view, the soul is within the heart, and we are eternal. And this is the powerful thing about palmistry. Not to make any enemies with astrologers, but the idea here is that palmistry to me is even more powerful than astrology, because you're looking at a person's hand and those signs and symbols and everything's coming directly from the soul, and the soul is imprinting the hand. It's like its own GPS system, if you will. The soul is putting these signs and symbols and configurations on our hands directly. And if you're looking just like at an astrological chart, there's a little bit of a disconnect. In fact, many times I'll give a reading to someone and they'll say, you got all that from my hand? And they start reading palmistry books and they feel an intimacy with it, because what I'm getting from their hand, they feel this closeness and like I say, intimacy, because I'm getting directly from their hand, not just a pie chart on a computer. You understand? Mm-hmm. Now, in the Vedic system, they say that at 7 months in the womb, the child begins to wake up, if you will. They're dreaming about their previous lives at around 7 months. They start to become conscious of their previous lives at around 7 months. And then the fingerprints, according to the Vedic system, are put into the hands at 7 months in the mother's womb. Now, interestingly enough, the Navajo Indians have a legend that actually at 7 months also, God blows his breath on the child in the mother's womb, and that breath becomes the fingerprints on the child's hands. So I think that's amazing. I just think that's an awesome way of looking at that. Where the Navajo Indians, they say they got their knowledge of astrology and palmistry from demigods, from other planets. So in the same way, in the Vedic view, they say the same thing. In other words, demigods, goddesses, they bequeathed on human society the understanding of hand reading and astrology. In fact, even the person's name I invoked before, Garga Rishi, Krishna's palmist, he was also a 10% pure devotee of God. He was not of this planet. He lived on the planet, but he was like a demigod. So what interested me again was fingerprints. So I wanted to go to India to learn what the Vedic view says about fingerprints, and that's what I learned. So it just completed. I'm still learning, obviously, but it really made so much sense to me. Now, in the fingerprints, again, are what you did in your previous life, what talents we bring in our previous life, what goals we have in this previous life, and the fingerprints are. Of course, they never change. Law enforcement uses them for identification purposes, but they have no clue about how much life, purpose stuff coming from the soul is in them. That's, of course, not
maybe
their job.
They don't know, really, isn't it? I think they just think it's just fingerprints. Don't worry about it. Otherwise, it's going to be like that. What was that movie where they were arresting people before they even committed a crime?
But, to continue on in this theme, what I also found is that I was not the only one going to, let's say, India and Malaysia and these countries to learn the Vedic system. In fact, I met a lot of, not just in India, but here, it's actually the Western palmists and the Western especially Western astrologers who are going to the Oriental world, if you will, to learn the Vedic system, and they're resurrecting it. What I found in India, and it was a little disappointing to me that they did not broadcast it or promote it themselves. They kept it within their own families or gotra. They didn't share it. But it's the Westerners who are bringing out the Vedic system and then sharing it with the world, you see. And interestingly enough, Andrew, now they're getting on board and saying, oh my God, the Westerners, the British palmists and the American palmists and the astrologers, they're doing it. So now it's kosher. It's great. We're into Vedic aspects too. So, the grass is always greener on the other side.
There's an element of that in everything, isn't there? I see that a lot, particularly even like Ayurvedic stuff as well. I noticed that, there's been a lot of work done by people in the West on Ayurveda, and it's re-stimulated. So for instance, when I was studying in Sri Lanka, one particular department, which was more the alchemical preparations, they were saying that they actually had a pretty low intake of students for that. But it's become more popular in recent years because there's been a reawakening of interest in the West in that. So that's kind of propagated back to the East.
Yeah, I have a friend I've known for years. He's an acupuncturist, and he was telling me, and I believe this was in the late 80s, that he was looking around for office space, and nobody would even rent him an office because they would say, you stick needles in people's bodies. And now he tells me it's so mainstream, they're just turning out acupuncturists, every other day, and it's so mainstream now. But thankfully, in the world of palmistry and astrology, I find that especially in the palmistry world, there are so many wonderful palmists out there, men and women, who are contributing something to our science. And also, what's happening now is that the public is becoming discriminating about who they want to go to see. They're actually, asking, oh, have you ever been to this? Can you recommend me a palmist? Can you recommend me a numerologist? And so the public, actually, palmistry is riding this wave right now because people are becoming more and more interested in it. Mm-hmm. And as I say, they're starting to become not only aware, but starting to understand the principles behind it. Mm. So it's an exciting time right now. I really see palmistry as becoming very, very popular over, as we in the next few years, as it is now.
So looking back at, you were saying about the print work that you're doing now. So how much of that, what were you actually able to see in India? What were you see people? I've noticed on the very old drawings, but I mean, these are like sort of 17th, 18th century. Quite often they'll show one of the primary types of print. So you'll see like a chakrika, for like whorls, and you'll see the kalash,
whorls, loops, tented arches.
Conch, yeah. So they're there, but I wasn't able to sort of pull so much information out of that. I had a really hard job trying to find, textually, it's not an easy thing to find, and certainly you can find stuff about the lines in quite old. I mean, some of the Puranic texts, they go into detail about the lines and their meanings. Even some very old, I think it's Mahira's book on, Brihat Samhita, and he talks
Brihat Samhita.
Yeah, so he talks about the special markings. He talks about some of the lines, but it's physiognomy as well. It's the face, it's the body. Hands are mentioned to a degree in there, but it's not a huge amount of information. But I just wondered, what did you come across when you were in India? Did you find anything that sort of looked more conclusive? You think, I could really get information?
The goal of Vedic palmistry and astrology is ultimately to understand one's self-realization. The whole Vedic view is that we're not this body, we're spiritual soul, we're just in this body and this material world for a temporary time. And human life is so important because it's the only form of life that we can understand God and ask questions. Who am I? What am I here for? What's the purpose of life? So the whole Vedic view, the whole Vedic, the whole culture of the Vedic system, both spiritually and astrologically and palmistically, is to encourage people to understand who they are as a spirit soul, and to ultimately develop bhakti, love for God, and to give up lust, give up greed, give up envy, give up anger, and cultivate the qualities of tolerance and mercy and humility. So that is what I saw as the goal of the fingerprint system, and of course palmistry and astrology in general, to help one to understand what are their talents, what are their abilities in the material world, but more importantly, to help people to understand how to move forward spiritually, and to culture spiritual life and become detached from this material world and attached to devotion, you see. And of course, I haven't, other than Richard, I haven't met anyone really who really understood fingerprints or even gotten very much into it as me and Richard have done. And the only people I've ever seen who understand fingerprints have been my students over the years and Richard's students over the years. So, you know, coming from a Western background, I figured out the fingerprint system. Of course, I think it was coming through me. I don't take any credit for it. But I used it solely in terms of how to live your passion. So you, in your life, if you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life.
When you're actually, so your client comes in and they say, okay, right, here's my hands, off we go. So give us a breakdown of what time and what time and focus will you put on each individual trait. So do you firstly look at the constitutional type of the hand? Do you look at the lines, or do you look at fingerprints before anything else? I mean, how much detail do you go into? Are you just mainly interested in the primary lines, or you're looking at lots of secondaries? I mean, walk us through a sort of a way that you would do an interpretation.
It's kind of like when you first meet a person, you may notice their clothes or their car or something about them. And when I first look at a hand, my eye goes to something that is very individualistic about them. That's the first thing I look at. What is this? What is these? What sets them apart from other people? My eyes just immediately go to that. But one of the cool things about palmistry is that, as I said before, it's the soul that is relaying these lines and configurations, and of course fingerprint patterns into the hand. So palmistry on the Vedic view has this very underlying, let's say, subconscious, you could call it mystical, metaphysical, and spiritual roadmap. And on top of that, there's an overlay of astrology, you see. So I use both systems simultaneously. For instance, just a brief overview. If you notice that we have 12 segments on our fingers.
Yeah.
3 on each finger. These are the Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo. These are the, let's say, the signs. And so at the same time, all the 12 planets are represented, all the 12 houses, even smaller planets like Chiron and other asteroids, and of course in the Vedic system, the nakshatras, and in the Western system, the fixed stars. So to answer your question, the first thing I look at is the hand shape. I may look at something else because like I said, it draws my eye to it. I'm like, wow, this is interesting about this person. So I'm going to keep that in my mind. But the hand shape is the most important thing to look at at earth, water, fire, air hand shape, because it's kind of like, this is the kind of house you live in. Or do you live in a two-story house? Do you live in a mansion? You know, what kind of a car do you drive? The hand shape is like the physical vehicle that you inhabit, and it talks very much about your approach to life and how you attack life, if you will. So let's say a person with a fire hand, for instance, that's a long palm and short fingers. They're ruled by fire, so they're usually very active, energetic, always busy, always on the go, very enthusiastic. So they're going to approach life in that way. Someone who has a square palm and short fingers, that's the earth shape. So they're going to be very interested in their life in establishing security and stability and foundations. So this is the first thing I look at is the hand shape, because it's the most obvious aspect of the hand. This is the shape of the hand. So again, it's kind of like, what kind of dwelling do you live in? What kind of car do you drive? It's your physical vehicle, if you will. And I definitely look at the lines, but the lines to me are not that important. Most Western palmists put a lot of thought into the lines. The lines are, not that I want to diminish their importance, but they are the chakra systems. So for instance, the headline would be the seventh chakra. The lifeline would be the second chakra. The fate line, as they say, would be the first chakra. So the chakras are always changing. They're energy systems. But I definitely look at the fingerprints. The fingerprints are the second thing I look at very much. And then everything just comes together after that, you see. And I make notes of it. I do a lot of readings over the phone, as I'm sure a lot of readers do. So I have people send me photos of their hands that they text to me, and then I just read from there.
How's the best, I mean, for doing fingerprints, how are you doing that remotely? Most people just putting them onto a scanner and then reversing the image, or just getting with an iPhone and just get close enough to...
Andrew, today's iPhones have incredible cameras, and I just ask people to take a direct shot of their fingerprints, and I can see everything. It's unbelievable to me. Yeah. You know, and if one is a little blurry, I'll say, hey, can you snap it again? No, it's amazing. I'm palmists today and astrologers today. We are, sitting very pretty because we don't have people to have to fly over to see us. We can do readings all over the world. We get to hang out on our phone and do all our readings on the phone. So I think it's actually wonderful.
That's another reason why I think it's gained in popularity, a lot of these sciences, because like even things like iridology, you're now able to take a picture of your eye and send it to somebody. And so, like you say, these things weren't easily accessible before. The old school of photography wasn't an easy, they're almost sort of, I hate to use the word idiot proof, but they're almost proof. So it's very difficult to take a bad picture, even if you're, I still see people with amazing cameras who still take terrible pictures, but it's a lot harder to do that, isn't it? Most of the time you're going to get a reason.
Here's the thing. If somebody's having problems photographing their hands, I say, hey, ask, you have a son or a daughter, get a millennial to do it. And they take the best shots. So it's very easy. I'll tell you, it's even rare that I have to say, can you rephotograph this? The camera, the cameras today on the iPhones are incredible. And so the goal of my readings, ultimately, of course, I do have to tell people about relationships, and now a big thing is location. In the last 3 or 4 years, everybody wants to know: should I move to Tennessee? Should I move to Europe? Everybody wants to know about location. There's so much movement.
So what would you be looking at on the hand to give you indicators for that? What would you kind of target? Would that be more back to the lines, or would it be more?
No, that's the astrology. I would look at the astrology on the hand. The astrology tells me everything, and sometimes I can look at, let's say, I can look at an aspect of astrology and can see, let's say, a person's going to move to like Western Europe or something, and my intuition will say, oh, they're going to be moving to Germany or something like that. That type of thing. So of course. That's the beauty of palmistry, in that you can look at everything in a very scientific way, if you will, astrologically and fingerprint wise. But the hand lends itself to the whole aspect of psychic energy, and that's really powerful. And I have had astrologers, both Western and Vedic, tell me. Not a few, but I would say I've had 80% of astrologers that I've met have told me intuition plays no role in reading a chart. And to me, palmistry and intuition are concomitant. They go hand in hand with each other. So we have that overlay of being able to look at everything scientifically, if you will, just like from planetary aspects, and at the same time, you can read around the planets, if you will, to even get a deeper reading if you use your intuition. And I would say to you that my ultimate goal, of course, is to give people knowledge of their spiritual self. What spiritual path to follow, who they are emotionally, because emotionally and spiritually we're both the same. The soul is an emotional entity. Many people in the New Age world, the mind, body, spirit world, will say, "Oh, we're energy," or "We're all one." No, we're not all one. We're individual souls, and the makeup of the soul in Sanskrit is Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. We are pure emotion, pure devotion. And it has everything to do with putting our emotion and our devotion into spiritual life. So, of course, I will tell people, hey, you're going to meet someone in 2 years, and this is going to be your relationship. And I'll tell them about their career and how to become successful and fulfilled in it, what the best areas to live in. But ultimately, I want to tell people about who they are as a spiritual person and how to move forward in self-realization. Because to me, and of course, growing up in a Vedic surrounding, that is the most important thing. Human life is for self-realization. It is for God realization. And so and I think that I got that from the Vedic view, not from the Western view.
There is a real connection in the Vedic tradition between astrology and palmistry. There's no doubt about that. The planets play an integral part of that. But you probably, I don't know if you listened to some previous interviews I've done with a more Western approach, but obviously that's kind of been thrown out now. They don't talk about planets. They don't talk about, I was asking about the planetary mounds. They don't use the mounds anymore. While some of the interpretations for the individual fingers still sounds a lot like that planet to me, the planets aren't really mentioned. But this is something that's very integral to the Vedic system. That's something I like because we have so much information about the planetary implications anyway. So would you say if I knew Vedic astrology and I was going to learn Vedic palmistry, it's pretty much the same interpretation planetary wise, or did you see a slightly different way of approaching it on the palm? Will they talk about the same planetary energies in a slightly different way, or is it pretty much the same? I'm just curious.
Oh, that's a wonderful question, Andrew. I'm going to answer it this way. And again, no criticism to my brethren and my peers. I know so many wonderful palmists, and I have so much care and relationship for them and respect for them. But most Western palmists cannot really say, "Oh, the moon is in the 6th house conjunct with Mercury," or something like that. They aren't able to say what house or sign a planet is in. And what I learned from the Vedic system is that you can do that. The only difference is that in your mind, you've got to kind of recondition it. For instance, I'm an Aquarius in Western astrology, but in Vedic, I would be Capricorn. My sun would be in Capricorn. So because I'm very acclimated to the Western system, the way I think, if I'm looking at something Vedic-wise, and I'm looking at one planet in a particular sign, I've got to change it to go to the Western system. But what I do find is that most Western palmists, and nothing against them, is that they've heard about the mountains, the mounts, and this, but they can't really tell you, oh, Venus is in the 3rd house. Conjunct with this planet, and Venus is in the 9th house or something like that. They can't do that. That's not their system. They haven't really learned that. But it's an integral part of palmistry to know. Anything that an astrologer can see, I can see. And that's really very important to be able to see and be, I think, to be familiar with all the 12 houses and the 12 signs and the 12 the 12 signs. I think it's very important because that's our scientific, if you will, system. And of course, underneath it all is the more soul system of intuition and the subconsciousness. So both need to be there. But that's what I pulled out from the Vedic, how to actually understand, just as an astrologer does. If an astrologer says the moon is in the 2nd house, I know what he's talking about.
What
You
about
understand?
like the nakshatras as well? Are is that integrated into the what you're doing as well? Is
I
that
like the nakshatras. I'm more familiar with using what we call the Western system, the fixed stars,
Hmm.
simply because my brain is more acclimated to the Western system. I like the fixed stars, but the nakshatras are extremely important, and I look at them too. But I do find that the asteroids and the what we call in Western astrology the ruling planet will suffice and give the same information as a Vedic reader who looks at the nakshatras. But again, I'm not, the nakshatras are very, very important. But in palmistry, in my view, the fixed stars and figuring out what the ruling planet is much more in alignment with reading a hand.
Hmm. Sorry, I was going to just say about what
Please.
about the deities as well. I mean, are you recommending? So, will you recommend if you see a particular planet that needs placating in the hand, they need a bit of extra moon, or some Jupiter needs enhancing, or Mars is too powerful? Are you working with like mantras? Are you giving stones?
Oh yeah,
It's
that's a
sort of
great
like,
question.
yeah.
You Vedic astrologers are notorious for saying, "Oh, you should wear amber, or you should wear this," and Western astrologers couldn't care less about that. We don't even know about that stuff. But I always, because of my Vedic upbringing, I was taught to, before I give a reading, I was told to chant certain mantras like Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And of course, again, because I grew up in the temple in the Hare Krishna world, I will even say the Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, like that. And there's various mantras that I learned in India, or let's say in my Vedic path, let's say to invoke certain deities, if you will. So I'll explain. In the Western astrology, of course, even in the Western world, astrologers and astronomers too, astrologers and astronomers see these planets like the moon and Jupiter and Saturn as just dead planets. In the Vedic view, that's not the case at all. If I'm looking at somebody's hand and I'm looking at the moon and I want to get some intuition about it, I will actually say a mantra to the. I will actually say a mantra to Chandra, who's the god, or Chandrika, who's the goddess of the moon.
Mm.
So what's interesting is that they call these, in astrology, the houses. Well, the houses are actually the houses or the mansions of these demigods and goddesses. So that's a big difference between the Vedic and the Western astrology, Andrew, because the Vedic astrology, Vedic palmistry, sees these planets as fully alive, having millions of demigods and goddesses and angels, Gandharvas, the whole nine yards, and you can pray to them and say certain mantras. Like Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and ask these great persons to help you in your reading. This is unheard of in the Western system.
Mm.
You see, a Vedic astrologer or palmist sees themselves as a messenger of these not just planetary energies, but planetary personages. That's a great difference. So when I'm looking at the moon and maybe the third house or the ninth house or this sign or that sign, I may actually say a mantra to Chandra, and just say, what's going on here? Give me some insight. Give me some knowledge. So Vedic astrology is very alive. It's alive with that, and a Vedic astrologer or palmist feels a sense of intimacy and with the planetary energies. You see.
Mm-hmm. Would you corroborate the palm with the actual chart? So would you look at both, or are you tending to just do the work purely with the palm, or will you?
Oh, I can see everything in the hand. Yeah.
So there's no need to reference any birth dates.
No,
You can
but if and I have done many charts with astrologers, and many times astrologers And this happens this happens all the time. So, sometimes an astrologer will say, I don't know this person's birth time or birth. Can you tell me a little bit, can you look at this hand? They'll send me the hand and I'll try to at least look at what is the ruling planet or like that. I can't just say this person was born at 5:15 in the morning, but I could be, maybe a half hour, interplay between that, because the difficulty with astrology, if you will, is that even if you could have a chart done by the most professional of professional readers, but if you're even like 15 or 20 minutes off a chart, you could throw the whole chart off. And in palmistry, we don't have that problem because everything is clearly written on the hand concretely. You see, so at the same time, we can't really say, oh, this person was born at 5:15, but we could say around, between 5 o'clock and, but it's all written there. We don't have to know what time a person is born. It's all written there. If an astrologer tells me, the moon is in the second house and Mercury's, conjunct with this, I understand what they're saying. But for me to look at a pie chart on a computer is a bit impersonal. I'd rather look at the live hand.
I mean, there's the two pieces of, or two techniques that hopefully give a similar outcome, but they're a totally different discipline. I find that looking at charts and learning the system, the astrological system, is quite different to the hand. I'm a bit like you. It's almost like it's quite relaxing to look at the hand compared with the chart, because the chart, you have so many techniques and there are so many layers. It's almost like it's a real process. You go on a journey and deduct. Whereas the hand, it's kind of everything's there and it just sort of presents itself and you just go. I feel it's much more of an intuitive part of the science. That's how it feels to me anyway. I feel that the astrology is much more like a technical.
Well, Andrew, it brings up an interesting thought in my mind. I remember years ago, I think it was by a guy named, astrologer named William Frawley, and he wrote a book about Vedic astrology, which I thought was very interesting. And the first chapter in his book said, the difference between Vedic and Western astrology. And in parentheses, or how to start a fist fight amongst astrologers. One thing I didn't like is Vedic astrologers sometimes, especially if they're Western, I didn't see this in India, but especially those who are bringing back the Vedic system are prone to say, oh, Western astrology isn't bona fide at all. It's, it's everything's, by the sun and it's tropical and this and that. And, I don't like that, because I think Western astrology is just as accurate, just as bona fide, just as amazing.
Yeah, that's probably David Frawley's Astrology of the Seers. I think probably he did a section at the beginning. Yeah, it's a very good. I'd recommend that book to anybody. It's a very concise and easy read, and it'll explain why the two systems are different. And like you say, he says the same thing, because I think he came from a Western background.
Yes.
It's just where you measure from is slightly different, but you should get the same results.
Exactly. And what I want to see is that there's so many, of course I'm a palmist, so I'm biased. I like palmistry better, but I revere those astrologers and palmists who are contributing something to their art, to their science. And of course, there are so many more astrologers than there are palmists. And, you can go into a bookstore and see a book on astrology that's just the Book of Neptune or the Book of Saturn or that type of thing. And I want to one day see where palmists write books on the Jupiter finger. The thumb.
I don't think that's
and right now all palmistry books are every palmistry book that comes out basically is they're all how to understand the hand, the introduction to palmistry books.
Yeah, it's like a beginner's cookbook guide.
Exactly. They're all
everything.
Yeah, exactly. You answered it for me. The beginner's guide to palmistry. Practically 99% of all palmistry books are the beginner's guide to palmistry. Yeah. And of course we've got to start somewhere, but I want to be able to walk into a Barnes and Noble one day and just see a book dedicated to the Mercury finger.
You've given yourself a task. That's your job. You have to go away and start writing some individual books. And that sort of brings us nicely back to our where we kind of kicked off. So how do people go about getting into contact with you, or if they were interested in studying with you? Because I know you've got you run courses, and your website's got you're running a whole school, I think, as well, and there's lots.
PalmistryInstitute.com. That's how they can get to me. PalmistryInstitute.com.
Okay.
And I've put together my institute simply because my whole goal in giving readings or being on podcasts like yours, your wonderful podcast, is that I want to help to bring dignity back to the science of palmistry, the art of astrology. I want palmistry to be, again, I do think we're becoming mainstream, but at the same time, people are more familiar with astrology in general. So I want to bring that credibility back to palmistry. Palmistry really has been in disrepute in America, at least for at least 100 years, and I haven't seen this in England. I haven't seen this in other countries, but in America especially, palmistry, astrology, numerology, psychic stuff is considered, the devil's work. So I started my institute, of course, because I wanted to teach, but more importantly, to bring dignity back to palmistry, to bring credibility to it, and to promote it as something that this is the most amazing science of self-realization, other than just meeting a very saintly person. You see.
So what's the format that you offer then? So people come and just do one-to-one, or do they bring their own prints and we talk about those, or do they come and actually join? Is it like a weekly thing? What sort of format, or how do you run the school? How do you prefer?
Most of my time, Andrew, is spent in giving readings. I practically, I give a reading or two a day, and I love it. I love doing. I know. For instance, Richard, I think he spends more time teaching, and it's incredible what he does. But myself, I spend most of my time giving individual readings over the phone or in person, and I do the occasional Zoom instructional.
I think that's where you have to start. Most people will start with their own palm, and then they'll get an interest from there.
That is absolutely true. 100%. People have told me, hey, I might want to learn palmistry, but I want to get a reading first. And that's totally cool.
So people can see you via the website, go to the website direct. I know on YouTube there are 2 or 3 videos up that you've done. I mean, there's material out there people can watch.
I find, just like what happened to you, is that so much of my readings come from referrals. And really, that's the lifeblood of what I do, because people like me who give readings, intuitive readers, astrologers, numerologists, there's an intimacy between us and the client. We can talk to clients about things that they are really interested in, but they wouldn't ask anybody else or share any of this information with just their friends or their lovers. Or people talk to us about things that they are really, let's say, worried about or passionate about, and they talk about the most intimate things, and they feel a closeness and a connection with people who do the type of work I do. So, of course, many times I'll do podcasts or be on the radio or be on internet networks like that. But the real lifeblood is referrals, because if someone's gotten a good reading, they feel a sense of like I say, intimacy and closeness and connection with that reader. So they tend to say, "Oh, you've got problems? Oh, call this guy."
Great. Okay. Well, I'll get. We'll put all the information up at the end. Do another link back to your website, and and if people have got any questions, they can just contact you directly via the website.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I recommend people check Vernon out. Thank you again, Vernon, for coming and speaking.
Oh, Andrew, it's been such a
I
pleasure.
appreciate your coming on and talking.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you again.
God bless.
Appreciate it.